everybody. I have here with me Robert Schwartz. He's the author of Your Soul's Plan, and I'm so delighted to be speaking with you, Robert, and speak about the soul today.
Thank you, Lilou. It's a pleasure to be here.
Um, you have experienced something quite extraordinary in May 2003. Can you tell us more about that? Can you tell us what happened on that day and where you were coming from before? What happened on this day and how it transformed your life?
I'd be happy to. On May 7th of 2003, I had a session with a psychic medium. Now, this is something that has since become commonplace for me, but the session on May 7th of 2003 was the very first time I had ever worked with a medium. What led me to her was what you might call an existential crisis. I had been working as a self-employed marketing and communications consultant, was deeply unfulfilled with the work I was doing, and so in my search for my higher calling or higher purpose in life, I had tried a number of conventional routes, none of which really gave me much insight. So on May 7th of that year, I went to a medium hoping to find out what the purpose of my life was. And I did. It changed everything and launched me on the path to writing the book, Your Soul's Plan.
What did you discover? What happened there? You met your spirit guides. Is that right?
I did. And I didn't even know what a spirit guide was at that time, but the medium explained to me a guide is a highly evolved non-physical being with whom we plan our lives prior to birth, and then who then guides us through our lives after we get here. And through this particular medium, I was actually able to speak with my guides. They said to me, "You planned many of your greatest challenges before you were born." And I said, "Why in the world did I do that?" And they went on to explain, "You did this for purposes of spiritual growth." So we talked a little bit about what some of my challenges had been and why I'd actually wanted prior to birth to have these experiences. Now, I can't overstate to you the effect that this information had on me. In the days and weeks after that session with the medium, I thought about this constantly. And it allowed me to go back over the course of my life, review the seemingly bad things that had happened to me, and in many cases for the very first time, see a deeper meaning or a deeper purpose to these events. For me, this experience was profoundly healing. So I realized I was onto a concept that could bring a similar kind of healing to other people. And it was at this point that I started to think about writing a book about how we plan our lives before we're born, and specifically why we plan certain challenges for ourselves. That launched 3 years of research, which culminated in a book that is now called Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. In researching the book, I tried to make it as helpful to as many people as possible. So I chose very common life challenges. In Your Soul's Plan, there are chapters on the pre-birth planning of physical illness, which includes a story of a man who planned AIDS and a woman who planned breast cancer. There is a chapter on the pre-birth planning of having disabled children. It's the story of a woman who plans prior to birth to have 2 autistic sons. A chapter on the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness, alcoholism and drug addiction, the death of a loved one, and severe accidents.
So what
And
is the
so in these
general conclusions that you have about interviewing all those people, and why did they choose particularly those challenges apart from spiritual growth? Is it, I mean, I understand that it's all spiritual growth, but why did they had some more healing to do on this planet? Did they had another mission? What was it related to?
Well, we found 4 primary reasons for the planning of life challenges. The first one was to balance karma. And this is probably the reason that people know the most about it and have heard the most about. Karma is sometimes thought of as cosmic debt. I don't really think of it that way. I think of it more in terms of unbalanced energy. So to give people a simple example, if 2 people had a past life in which one was physically ill and the other was that person's caretaker, when those 2 people transition back into spirit and have their life review, as we all do, they will have a sense of unbalanced energy around that relationship and be motivated to balance it. The easiest, simplest, most direct way to do that is to plan another lifetime together in which they switch roles. So now the one who was the caretaker plans the life challenge of physical illness, and the one who was ill plans the life challenge of caretaking. That's a simple example of karmic balancing, and that was one of the 4 reasons we found. Second reason you just mentioned is healing, and I'll share with your viewers a quick story from the book to illustrate that.
Mm-hmm.
In the chapter on the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness, I share the story of a young African-American woman whose name is Penelope. Penelope was born completely deaf in both ears. When we went into Penelope's pre-birth planning session, we actually heard the conversation with her guide in which they discuss the deafness. And what we learned is that in the lifetime immediately previous to this one, Penelope had the same mother she has in this lifetime. In that past life, when she was a child, Penelope heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. Now, she didn't actually see the murder, but she heard the gunshots that led to her mother's death. She was quite traumatized by this, and it actually led her to commit suicide in that lifetime. When she returned to spirit and had the life review, her guide said to her, "My dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that no similar trauma happens to you again, and so that you can complete your healing from the past lifetime?" And Penelope responds, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." So that's an example of the second reason we found healing. Third major reason is service to others. And this was something we saw in every pre-birth planning session we looked at. We heard souls talking about the desire to serve one another through their challenges. And the fourth major reason, and this is really the big one to my way of thinking, is a desire to experience contrast. And what I mean is this. In the non-physical realm, as I understand it, it's very much as it's classically portrayed, which is to say it's a realm of great peace and joy and love and light. Now I believe, and I have directly experienced this myself, that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. So if we are love, and we are in a realm in which there is only love, we experience no contrast to ourselves, and therefore don't fully understand who we really are. So I believe we come here to a realm of duality because here there's a lot of contrast to love, and when we experience that contrast, it teaches us what it means to be a soul who is made literally from the energy of unconditional love.
So do we want to experience all four at the same time, or is it just one particular one at a time, or how does this work?
We saw souls sometimes desiring to experience only one of those four things. In other cases, they were motivated by 2, 3, sometimes even all four of those motivations. So it varied from individual to individual.
But you're saying, and that's very interesting, that at the core of our energy, or at the core of ourselves, we're unconditional love. So
I,
are those experiences on the planet Earth supposed to help us to become that again in this lifetime?
It's not that we're becoming it again. It's more the case that we've forgotten that that's who we are, and now we're trying to remember. And the reason for this, from a soul perspective, is that through the process of forgetting and then remembering, this gives the soul what you might call a more profound self-knowing, a more profound understanding of what it means to be a loving being.
Mm-hmm.
This is hard to understand from a human perspective, so the analogy I like to use that I think is helpful in understanding it, if someone watching this video today were later today, God forbid, to be struck on the head by a tree branch, knocked unconscious, and then wake up with amnesia, what would happen from that point? Well, in all likelihood, every person who loves that individual, all the friends and relatives, would undertake what amounts to a massive re-education project. They would produce every letter, every email, every photograph sent and received. They would put all of this information in front of the person with amnesia, and they would re-educate them about who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the individual with amnesia, since they lack memory, they would pay particularly close attention to every single detail. A lot of details that they're not paying close attention to right now. So in a certain sense, it would be accurate to say that by the time the re-education were completed, they would have a more profound knowing of who they really are. That's a crude analogy, but it approximates what the soul is doing here on the physical plane. We are love. We forget that we are love when we come into body. And by going through the life challenges, we are reminded of our true nature, depending upon how we respond to these challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the remembering that we carry back into spirit with us to our souls that gifts the soul with a more profound self-understanding.
And as you said, the how do we respond to this is key. A lot of fear comes in. A lot of it feels threatening. The ego kicks in.
Yes.
How you? I think I've heard you in some previous speeches talk about some tools that you have to maybe overcome those, like a mirror
Well,
exercise.
there are a number of things you can do to listen to the voice of the soul as opposed